This is Pharaoh's treasure. Come and take it if you dare. It is yours.
I am Khamun, a name that perhaps few remember amidst the myriad of dazzling titles of pharaohs and illustrious generals who once led conquests. I was not a warrior, nor was I a majestic priest in a sacred ritual. I was merely a servant of intellect, a keeper of the dynasty's treasury of memories. But it was precisely because of knowledge, because of the thirst to understand all that was hidden, that I became entangled in a fate no one could have foreseen. My entire life was bound to hieroglyphs, to papyrus, to the scent of incense in tombs and temples. I was trusted by the pharaoh for my exceptional memory. I could memorize an entire book of rituals after just a few readings. Others saw me as a mere scribe, but in my heart, I knew I was the keeper of the key to the past, for without me, dynasties would vanish into oblivion, and no one would remember how glorious they once were. In those days, I believed my quiet service was enough to secure my legacy. But then, fate led me to a discovery that ignited ambitions within me that I never knew I possessed. That day, I was with a retinue surveying an old sacrificial chamber on the outskirts of Memphis. The chamber had long been forgotten. The local people considered it a gloomy place, and no one dared to venture near. They said that restless souls still wandered in its darkness. I merely scoffed. As a scholar, I did not believe in unfounded rumors. To me, every trace was a piece of history that needed to be recorded. Carrying torches, we delved deep into the narrow corridors, where the stone ceiling was cracked and crumbling. The smell of dampness mingled with the stench of bat droppings made everyone grimace. The firelight flickered upon walls dotted with faded inscriptions. I stopped many times, placing my hand on the stone, reading the hieroglyphs about the rituals for the god Osiris. It was all familiar, nothing new. However, at the end of the corridor, beneath a pile of rubble that had fallen from the ceiling, my eyes caught something glinting in the torchlight. I signaled for my attendants to clear the stones. And then, we pulled out a stone tablet, broken in two, with only one half remaining. The moment my hand touched it, I knew this was no ordinary object. On its surface were strange engravings. Part of it resembled a very crude map, like a doodle leading somewhere. I recognized a few symbols pointing east, near the area of the previous pharaoh's tomb. But what truly sent a shiver down my spine were the inscriptions next to it. They belonged to no writing system I had ever known. Not hieroglyphs. Not demotic script. Not even the secret symbols used by priests in their rituals. I sat down on the ground, holding the tablet in my hands, feeling as if I held a secret beyond human comprehension. The servants looked at each other worriedly. One of them trembled and asked, "Sir, is this ... a cursed object?" I only smiled, but my heart was pounding. If this was indeed a map, and it led to a pharaoh's tomb, could there be a secret passage, a chamber no one had ever known? I ordered the tablet to be brought back. That night, in my small room filled with manuscripts, I placed it on the table. The oil lamp cast its light upon it, making the engraving seem even more mysterious. I took out old scrolls, comparing every detail. The map was crude, but the location it pointed to corresponded with the land surrounding the tomb of Pharaoh Nebkheperure, a place no one had been allowed to approach for generations. The more I looked, the more the tablet seemed to whisper to me, "Find me, decipher me." But those strange symbols, they looked like the ramblings of a madman. Or perhaps they were a code. I tried comparing them to Nubian script, to writings from Mesopotamia, even to the Hyksos characters from the time they invaded Egypt. But no, they were completely different. The more I studied, the more I was driven by a premonition. This was the clue to a terrible secret, something posterity had never touched. For many nights after, I did not sleep. I remembered every line I had seen in the pharaoh's tombs, the warnings carved on the walls, "The profane who intrudes shall be swallowed by darkness." I knew the danger well, but a question burned within me. If I uncover this secret, will my name be etched into history? Could I, who had spent a lifetime copying and serving, for once hold a secret that surpassed even the pharaoh. That thought grew stronger each day. Whenever I looked at the tablet, I no longer saw an inanimate rock, but a gateway to glory or to ruin. And so I made my decision. I would follow the tablet. I would go to the place the map indicated. I would discover what lay buried beneath the sand. On the day of my departure, I told no one except a few trusted servants. To them, I said only that it was a survey trip to add to the royal archives. But in my heart I knew this was a journey of destiny. I hid the tablet in a cloth bag, bringing with me paper, a stylus, a small dagger, an oil lamp, and a few rolls of linen in case of injury. The path before me led to a land where no one dared to tread. The desert was silent. The dunes were as high as the city walls of the gods. The wind howled, whipping up grains of sand that glittered under the sun. I walked on, my heart filled with both fear and excitement. I knew from that moment on, my life would no longer be as peaceful as it once was. And that, my friend, was how I began my fated journey. I did not yet know that behind that broken tablet, there was another half, and that those scribbled symbols were not meaningless, but a curse that awaited me. I still remember that morning clearly, when the sun had just risen above the desert horizon, painting the sky with a light as red as blood. I rode on the back of a gaunt camel, followed by 3 loyal servants. We carried water, dried provisions, and torches wrapped in cloth soaked in pine resin. In my tunic, close to my left breast, was the half-broken stone tablet, the strange guide that I believed to be my destiny. The desert was vast, its silence overwhelming. The camel's feet sank into the sand, making a soft crunching sound. The wind whipped against my face, blurring my vision, but my mind was fixed on the map. That feeling, a mix of fear and compulsion, made my heart beat faster, as if to remind me, you are entering a place where no one is permitted to set foot. For years, I had been accustomed to sitting in a room, writing under the light of an oil lamp. But today, every grain of hot sand beneath my feet felt like it was scorching my pride. I was no longer a man who merely copied the words of others. I was writing a new journey for myself. As we neared the area indicated by the tablet, the landscape began to change. The high sand dunes disappeared, replaced by massive rock formations that stood like natural walls. I recognized this as the periphery of Pharaoh Nebkheperure's tomb. For a long time, this place had been considered forbidden's land. The common people stayed away, believing the pharaoh's spirit still reigned here. But to my eyes, the cliffs looked like giant doors concealing something. I had the camel rest, then took out the stone tablet to compare it with the terrain. Indeed, the crude lines on the map matched the shapes of the rock formations here. I couldn't contain my excitement. We began to search for a passage. After several hours of searching, I chanced upon a small crevice, hidden by a pile of loose rocks. The wind blowing through it created a low, hollow whistling sound, like the breathing of a demon. I knew I was in the right place. I signaled for the servants to clear the rocks. After hours of hard work, a huge stone door was revealed. Its surface was covered with a long line of hieroglyphs and terrifying images, mummies being devoured by snakes, mortals kneeling in a sea of fire. At the bottom, a prominent inscription sent a chill down my spine. "He who is not of Pharaoh's blood shall die in the darkness." I froze. The curse. I had read hundreds of such warnings in other tombs, but they had never frightened me like this. Because now, I was not a scholar reading the words of the ancients, but the one standing right before that very door. My servants began to tremble. One of them fell to his knees, begging me to turn back. He said, "Sir, we should not go on. This is a place for the dead, not for the living." I looked at him, then back at the stone tablet in my hand. The strange, scribbled symbols on it, oddly enough, they seemed to arrange themselves into a sequence of instructions. I tried pressing the tablet against the door's surface. Just as I suspected, Some of the symbols on the stone matched the carvings on the door, like a strange key. I bit my lip. Having come this far, I could not turn back. I ordered the 2 remaining servants to hold the door steady while I pressed the symbols in sequence. The sound of stone grinding against stone echoed, slow and heavy. Then suddenly, the massive door slowly creaked open, releasing a blast of air so cold it chilled my bones. The flickering torchlight illuminated what lay inside, a dark, endlessly long corridor. I stepped in, my heart pounding in my chest. As soon as we ventured deeper, the traps began to appear. First were the small holes in the walls, from which arrows suddenly shot out, embedding themselves in the stone floor just a hand's breadth from my feet. A servant screamed, nearly falling. I recalled the symbols on the tablet and realized they were warnings. I took a deep breath, observed my surroundings, and then signaled to step only on the tiles marked with small engravings. Just like that, we escaped the rain of arrows. A little further on, the stone floor beneath us suddenly gave way, revealing a bottomless pit. One servant couldn't stop in time and slipped. His scream echoed and then fell silent in the darkness. I shut my eyes tightly, my heart heavy. But I could not turn back. Only I and 2 loyal men remained. I consulted the tablet, deciphering the guiding symbols, and found a narrow ledge along the wall, just wide enough for one person to pass. We edged along it, overcoming the deadly trap. The deeper we went, the clearer it became. Those scribbled symbols were not random, they were the key. A language no one had ever known, yet it held the way to bypass every trap in the tomb. Finally, after passing through countless corridors, we stopped before another large door. It was exquisitely carved, covered in a layer of fine sand. In the center of the door was a depiction of a shining sun, surrounded by stars. I knew this was the entrance to the pharaoh's burial chamber. I tremblingly touched the door, whispering softly, "So, I have finally arrived." An indescribable feeling washed over me, a mixture of fear and elation. I knew I had gone further than any scholar before me. I, Khamun, was no longer just a copier of words, but the first to open a secret door of history. We pushed the door with all our might. The stone moved slowly, with a hoarse, grinding sound. A sliver of darkness opened, and I stepped inside. Before my eyes, in the flickering torchlight, a vast chamber was revealed. The walls were covered with paintings depicting the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. In the center of the room, on a stone pedestal, lay a magnificent golden sarcophagus, glittering in the darkness. It felt as if my heart had stopped. I had truly entered the pharaoh's tomb. But I had no idea that this was only the beginning. For in the depths of this tomb, there was another secret, a secret that only the broken tablet in my hand could reveal. As the heavy stone door closed behind me, I stood silently in the dark chamber, illuminated only by the flickering torchlight. Before me was the brilliant golden sarcophagus, reflecting the light like a sacred flame. A heavy atmosphere enveloped the room. The scent of fragrant resins and the smell of death mingled, making my heart pound. For years, I had copied hundreds of texts describing funeral rites, had heard countless legends about the tombs of pharaohs, but now I was actually standing before one. It was an overwhelming feeling, as if I had just touched the boundary of the divine world. I drew closer, my trembling fingers touching the patterns on the lid of the sarcophagus. Every intricate carving depicted the sun, the Nile, the hawk-headed and jackal-headed gods. It was as if they were all watching me, the mortal who dared to enter a place reserved for the pharaoh's soul. My breathing grew heavy, and I took the broken tablet from my tunic. I wanted to examine it in the light reflected from the sarcophagus, hoping its splendor would help me understand it better. However, as soon as I raised the tablet, I froze. The scribbled symbols on it, which had been meaningless before, now seemed strange. The light reflecting from the pure gold made them glow faintly, as if they were dancing on the surface. I suddenly had a feeling this tablet was incomplete. One half was broken and missing, so where was the other part? The thought spurred me to search the entire room. I shone the torch along the walls. There, aside from the paintings depicting the pharaoh's soul passing through the underworld, I noticed a few strange cracks. I signaled for the two servants to help me check. We felt every brick, every stone niche. And then, in a narrow crevice at the far end of the room, after brushing away a thick layer of sand, I discovered a hollow space. I reached my hand inside, my heart pounding. My fingertips touched something hard and cold. I pulled it out, and nearly cried out in astonishment. It was the other half of the stone tablet. I collapsed onto the floor, my hands trembling as I fitted the two pieces together. They matched perfectly. A soft click sounded as the crack closed, as if the two pieces had waited 1,000 years just to be reunited in my hands. Instantly, the image carved on the surface became clearer than ever, a complete map, not only leading to the tomb, but extending much further, westward into the deep desert where no human foot had ever trod. Below the map was a line of strange symbols, this time not just meaningless scribbles, but seemingly structured. A sequence of unknown characters, like a long-forgotten ancient language. I was stunned. This was no longer just a map to a pharaoh's tomb. It was the key to a far greater treasure, lying beyond the confines of this burial site. I turned to my two servants. Their eyes were wide with terror. They stammered, "Sir, this is a curse. We must leave this place immediately." But for a moment, I no longer heard them. My heart throbbed. My breath came in ragged gasps. A voice echoed in my head. "Khamun, you have gone further than any scholar. You can touch what no one has ever touched. You will become the keeper of a secret that surpasses even the pharaohs." I gripped the two stone pieces tightly. But then, as the torchlight swept over them, I saw a final detail that sent a chill down my spine. At the very bottom of the tablet, right at the joined edge, was a bizarre symbol. It didn't belong to the map, nor did it resemble the other linguistic characters. It looked like an emblem, a circle cut in half, with the shape of a dagger in the middle. I had never seen such a symbol in all my knowledge. It radiated menace, like the mark of a curse. I knew it for what it was, a warning, but a warning of what? I could not yet understand. That night, we stayed in the chamber, keeping the torches lit. I spread out a piece of hide, placed the reassembled tablet before me, and began to redraw the map on papyrus. I analyzed every symbol, every line. The two servants huddled in a corner, watching me with fear, as if I were a madman. They whispered to each other that I was angering the pharaoh's spirit. I paid them no mind. In my eyes, there was only the map and the secret behind it. The more I studied, the more I realized one thing. This map was not made by Egyptians. The style of drawing, the way directions were marked, was completely different. It was as if it had been created by another, more ancient civilization, hidden beneath the golden sands. A terrifying thought flashed through my mind. What if even the pharaoh was merely a guardian of another power's treasure? If so, then I, Khamun, would be the first to touch the real truth. When the light of dawn filtered through a crack in the tomb ceiling, I looked up, my eyes bloodshot after a sleepless night. I had made my decision. I would not stop here. I would continue on, following this new map. I would find the great treasure hidden deep within the heart of the desert. My servants knelt, weeping, begging me to give up. But within me, the flame of ambition was already burning fiercely. I was no longer a scribe for others. I would write my own name into history, with blood, with sand, with treasure. As I packed my things, preparing to leave the tomb, my gaze fell once more on the final line of symbols on the tablet, that mysterious script. I didn't understand it all, but there were a few signs I could vaguely guess at: death, darkness, and exchange. As if it were a warning that to gain the treasure, a trade-off had to be made. I shuddered for a moment. But then, ambition overwhelmed fear. I tucked the tablet against my chest, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the pharaoh's tomb. The blinding sunlight hit my eyes as if welcoming a new man, a Khamun who was no longer just a scholar, but a hunter of the secrets of darkness. I did not know that, in that very moment, fate had placed in my hands the key that would unlock both treasure and death. I don't know how long I sat before the pharaoh's sarcophagus, my trembling hands fitting the two halves of the stone tablet together. Every crack lined up perfectly, as if they had never been separated. And when the complete image was revealed, my heart raced and my chest tightened as if I couldn't breathe. A map, not a map of this tomb, but of something else, larger, deeper. The curved lines connected like a river, winding westward, symbols twisted into circles like an eclipsed sun. And beneath it all, the winding script I had never known, a script that seemed to belong to no language system in all of Egypt. I leaned in close, my finger tracing each character. A cold sensation ran down my spine. These were not decorative symbols. They were a warning, I was certain of it. I had spent my life reading hieroglyphs, ritualistic texts, and magical scripts. But this, I could not read. I could only see fragments of meaning. Door, soul, exchange, eternal, eternal, exchange, blood. Why would a treasure require such words? I took a long breath and looked up at the pharaoh's sarcophagus. He lay there motionless, covered in gold and jewels, as if mocking the fear in my heart. A part of me wanted to leave immediately, to keep this secret as a discovery of a lifetime. But another part, stronger, fiercer, screamed, "This treasure is greater than any pharaoh. You will be the only one to know of it. You will no longer be the one who writes, but the one who is written about." Upon leaving the tomb, the brilliant sunlight struck my face. I blinked, gazing out at the vast desert. In my mind, the map was etched deeper than the patterns in the sand. Those who followed me were different. They were terrified. They had seen the traps, had heard the grinding of stone when I joined the two pieces. They whispered among themselves, planning to flee. I pretended not to hear, but I knew in my heart, this path was not meant for many. And indeed, by the third day, as I camped between a rock crevice, they were gone, leaving behind only a waterskin and a little dried food. I sat alone by the firelight, holding the stone tablet. The wind whistled through the rocks like a mournful cry. I let out a soft laugh, both bitter and relieved. Fine, from now on, it is just me and my fate. I began the journey following the second map. The desert before me seemed to want to swallow me whole. Sand whipped across my face, stinging every inch of my skin. Many times I collapsed, my mouth parched, my sweat depleted. But each time, I would place my hand on the tablet, and a strange sensation would flow through me, as if an invisible hand were lifting me to my feet. At night, I would spread out my papyrus, redrawing the map again, trying to decipher the symbols. I thought of exchange. What was it? A sacrifice? A piece of one's soul? Or an oath? At times, a horrifying thought struck me. What if the price is my own life? But immediately after, another voice would reply, "A life in exchange for immortal glory. Is that not a worthy trade?" After 7 days of walking, I reached a strange land. In the middle of the flat desert, enormous stones suddenly rose up, arranged in a circle. In the very center was a jet-black door, half buried in the sand. My heart felt like it had stopped. I recognized the symbols on the door immediately. They matched the tablet. This was the destination. I knelt, my trembling hand placing the tablet against it. Instantly, each symbol on the door began to glow faintly, spreading like the veins of a waking monster. The ground rumbled. I knew that if I just spoke the sequence of symbols aloud, the door would open. But at the same time, I heard the words I understood echo in my mind. Soul, exchange, eternal. Could this be the final door, the door of fate itself? I slumped onto the sand, holding my head in my hands. I was torn. One part of me screamed, "Don't do it. You have seen the curses. You know the consequences." Another part whispered, "Khamun, You were not born to die, an unknown scholar. You must go on. I remembered the cold eyes of the generals who had once mocked me. Khamun only knows how to copy words. He will never know victory. I remembered the high priest's sigh as he looked over my manuscripts. You are merely a servant, not a creator. I gritted my teeth. No, I will not die as a shadow. I stood up, held the tablet, and began to read. The sounds that came from my mouth were so strange that I myself shuddered. It was not Egyptian, not a human language. It sounded like an echo from the depths of the earth, from a distant time. With each word, the door shook violently. Sand poured down in a cascade. A frigid air, foul with the stench of death, blasted out. I trembled, but I did not stop. At the final syllable, the door let out a deafening boom. A crack opened, and darkness swirled within. And from that darkness, I saw it. A brilliant golden light, flashing and then retreating. The treasure. My heart felt like it would burst. I had made it. I had opened the door. I knew with certainty. From this moment on, my fate was no longer my own. I had opened the door. Standing before the opening, my breath came in ragged gasps, my heart pounding as if to break free from my chest. Part of me trembled with fear, but another part seethed like a flame of desire I had never felt in my entire life. The darkness beyond the door was like a bottomless abyss, but in the midst of that black pit, I had seen it. A flash of gold, sparkling like stars fallen to earth. The treasure was real. I laughed, a hoarse laugh that no longer belonged to an ordinary scholar. I whispered, "Pharaoh, you had your treasures, but now I am the one who opens this. I will step into the place you kept hidden. I will possess what is greater than even your throne." I stepped across the threshold. Cold, a biting cold slammed into me, piercing through my skin and flesh, touching my very bones. I shivered, goosebumps covering my entire body. This cold was not like the desert night wind, but like the invisible hands of the underworld caressing my skin. The space inside was vast, but I could see no ceiling, only a thick, cloying darkness so dense I felt its weight pressing down on my shoulders. With every step, the darkness seemed to cling to my feet, as if trying to hold me back. The only light came from the golden glimmers in the distance, shining brighter as I approached. And when I drew near, I stood frozen. Mountains of gold, silver, and jewels were piled higher than a man, flooding the entire chamber. Golden bracelets, jade amulets, enormous ingots of gleaming metal. There was even a throne, stone chairs, and silver vases inlaid with precious stones. It was a kingdom of gold, buried beneath the earth. My mouth fell open, but no words came out. In my entire life, I had only been allowed to touch records, papyrus scrolls, and the small, gold-plated statues the pharaohs bestowed. But this was a sea of gold. This was eternity. I knelt, my trembling hands scooping up a handful of jewels. They were as cold as ice, completely devoid of the warmth of life. But the light they reflected on my skin was brilliant, leaving me mesmerized. I whispered, my voice like that of someone in a delirium. "Mine, it's all mine, ... But in that very moment, I sensed something was wrong. The space fell unnaturally silent, so much so that I could hear my own heartbeat. The gold pieces in my hand suddenly felt heavier, colder. Then, a sharp pain shot through my chest. I dropped everything, clutching my chest with both hands. My breath caught. My heart beat chaotically, as if being squeezed by a giant, invisible hand. I staggered and fell, my head hitting the stone floor. My vision blurred, but in that instant, I clearly saw the tablet I had brought with me. It was glowing brightly, and the winding script upon it was changing. They were no longer symbols I couldn't understand. They rearranged themselves into a line of text I could read clearly. "He who opens the treasure will trade his life." The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. I screamed, my voice hoarse and broken. "No, it can't be." I am a man of wisdom. I cannot die here. This is my reward, not my death. But my voice only echoed in the darkness. There was no reply. The pain spread. My skin grew dry, cracking like the parched desert earth. I looked at my hands. They were withering, shriveling, the skin stretching taut over the bones. My veins were being drained, as if sucked dry by the room itself. I felt myself aging with every breath. A moment ago, I was a scholar of 40. Now I saw the reflection of a frail old man in my own eyes. I crawled, trying to cling to the gold bars, the jade rings. But everything slipped from my grasp. The gold was cold, hard and silent. It did not save me. It only watched me die. Why? I wheezed, my throat burning with thirst. I overcame every trap. I opened the door. Why is death my reward? In the darkness, a distant echo seemed to answer, as cold as the wind from 1,000 years past. Because this treasure is not meant for the living, my vision faded. I no longer saw the gold and silver, only the thick, enveloping darkness. Everything receded, even my own body felt alien. But in my final moment, a thought flashed through my mind. Perhaps this was the secret those inscriptions meant to convey. This treasure belonged to the pharaohs, and anyone who dared to open it would meet only one end, death, to become part of the curse. I, Khamun, who had served the dynasty my entire life with my intellect, had let greed lead me to this place. I thought I would be recorded in history as a great explorer. But the truth was, I would only become another corpse, buried in the darkness, unknown, unremembered. The last breath left my lips, as raspy as the desert wind. My eyes were wide open, but they no longer saw anything. In that moment, I understood. The treasure belongs to the darkness forever, and I traded my life as the price for my arrogance. I died right at the threshold of the treasure, becoming its first and only victim. I don't know how long I had stopped breathing. Death did not come like sleep, but like an abyss that swallowed me and held me captive, offering no escape. I no longer had a sense of my body, but my consciousness remained vague, lost, like a shackled spirit. In that endless darkness, I heard a sound. At first, it was very faint, like single grains of sand falling. Then it grew louder, becoming the sound of cracking, echoing throughout the chamber. Rumble, rumble, the massive walls fractured. The stone floor beneath my corpse trembled. Sand poured down from above like a flood. The treasure chamber, the place that held all the light I had ever craved, was collapsing. I wanted to scream, to flee, but my body was gone. I could only watch in despair as that sea of gold was swallowed by darkness and dust. The thrones, the silver vases, the brilliant gems. All of it sank, mixing with the earth and rock, disappearing from sight. The treasure was no longer a reward, but had become its own tomb. Outside, my retinue must have still been waiting for my return. Perhaps they thought I would bring back glory, a great discovery that would bring fame to the entire dynasty. But they would never see me again. When the sand covered everything, when all paths were blocked, this place would vanish. People might search, they might dig, but they would only find a flat, silent desert with no trace of an entrance. I, Khamun, a lifelong recorder of history, was ultimately erased by history itself. No page would bear my name, no stone tablet would carve my fate. Only this darkness would hold me, like an eternal prison. But strangely, in my despair, I began to hear whispers. The voice of someone, or rather, of many voices blended together, echoing in the tomb. You who dared to open the door, you will remain here, forever. The sound did not come from a specific direction, but from everywhere. It flowed into my ears, seeping into my very mind. I trembled, if a ghost could tremble. I understood. I had not died alone. The spirits of generations of pharaohs, of the guardians of the treasure, were present here. I had entered their kingdom, and now I had become a part of it. Outside, I heard the wind shriek across the desert. A sandstorm was rising. as if to permanently erase any sign that a human had ever set foot here. When the wind died down, when the sun rose, all that would remain was a vast sandy plain. No one would know I ever existed in this chamber. No one would see what I had seen. Only I, an imprisoned soul, would be the sole witness to a secret that would never be told. And now, as I drift in the darkness, I realize the treasure was not meant to be possessed, but to be a test. It tested greed, it tested will, it tested even humility. I had failed. I had chosen ambition over wisdom, and the price was oblivion. Perhaps 1,000 years from now, another will come. Perhaps a brave soul or a foolish one will stumble upon this secret. When they do, will they see my ashes or only darkness and dust? I do not know. I only know this. This story never truly ended. Because as long as the desert exists, as long as the pharaohs still whisper in the sand, that treasure will lie dormant, waiting for another hand to touch it. And I wonder, but is that truly the whole story? Or just the beginning of a curse that has not yet ended?